where we are no longer scattered amongst the nations and dependent upon them, for better or for worse, but we have a sovereign Jewish state. And we'll see how Donna Grazia is probably the one figure, early figure in Jewish history, who came up to the standard of Jewish pride and fighting spirit that is so much caught by the present-day state of Israel. And let's begin. We left off when the family had to leave Venice, always pursued by the Inquisition, by the Catholic Church, by the fanatical popes when they came along, such as Paul IV. And Donna Grazia's tremendous ability, tenacity, always having to be one step ahead of those who would have brought her down and robbed the family of its fortune. And so we left off last time with the diplomatic link between the Mendes family and Suleiman the Great, the Sultan, who weighed in with the Pope and with the Italian dukedoms in order to allow or release Donna Grazia after the mess made for her by her sister, Donna Brianda, in Venice. Now the family moves from Venice to Ferrara. So let's begin. We'll start with the English speakers as usual. Marcel, line 5, under Ottoman pressure.
Under Ottoman pressure, the proceedings in Venice against the sisters were dropped, and the reunited family left for Ferrara, where the Renaissance Duke Ercole II allowed them to enter his realm as practicing Jews. Jewish refugees have been made welcome in Ferrara ever since the Alhambra Edict, and the existing Jewish colony boasted a number of eminent Jews, including members of the Abarbanel family.
There was a very eminent woman, again, from the Abarbanel family, but the thing about Italy was that it was divided up into many dukedoms. The Pope had a lot of these dukedoms, and they are called the Papal States, and he basically laid down the law. But amongst the many dukes and dukedoms, there was the dukedom of Ferrara, and the Duke of Ercole, was in charge. And he, of course, even though you were close to the Pope, close to the Papal States, very close, in fact, he was able to allow Jews in because every duke, every little dukedom wanted Jews to get its economy on the go. So, indeed, in her official record.
In her official record of entry, she is referred to as Donna Grazia, wife of Don Semer Beneviste, and Donna Reina, wife of Don Meir Beneviste, with all their families and households.
Imagine that. You're about a half hour from the Papal States, and you can admit Jews who were once baptized. And this was the great crime and offense in Catholic eyes of the Jews, who became new Christians. Jews were bad enough, but Jews who were renegades, who had been baptized and become Catholics officially, had their lives saved, and then fled in order to go back to Judaism, they were the pits, and they needed to be found and destroyed. The Inquisition and its Judaizing phobia was the bane of the lives of all the Marranos. But Ferrara opened up a refuge, and it was Jewish money, of course, and financial expertise that opened the gates of these dukedoms in Italy. During her time in Ferrara, Marcel, you can finish.
During her time in Ferrara, Donna Grazia supported a number of refugee scholars and patronized both the translation of the Torah into Spanish, the Ferrara Bible, and an account in Portuguese of the persecution and the exile of Iberian Jewry, Consolations for the Tribulations of Israel by Samuel Usque.
Usque was a Marrano, of course, and he was able to make his way to Ferrara. And what Donna Grazia did with part of her money was to set up a printing press, print a Bible, Torah into Spanish, so the refugees would read and understand the Torah. And there was a book on the trials and the tribulations of Spanish and Portuguese Jewry by a Marano called Samuel Usque. Samuel Usque's work is a fine piece of Portuguese literature, apparently, and it contains a lot of praise for Dona Grazia. And for example, I'll just read you a few lines from the introduction to the Consolations of the Tribulations of Israel. Nor should you forget the help which you have had in the travels, in the travails which, as you say, you have experienced on the road from Portugal until you arrived in safety. Who has seen as you have the divine mercy reveal itself in human guise, as he has shown and continues to show you for your succor? Who has seen revive the intrinsic piety of Miriam, offering her life to save her brethren, the great prudence of Deborah in governing her people, the infinite virtue and great sanctity of Esther in helping those who are persecuted, the much praised strength of the most chaste and magnanimous widow Judith, who chopped off Holofernes' head, in delivering those hemmed in by travail. Such has the Lord sent to you in these days from the most supreme rank of his armies, embodying them in a soul of his, which by high chance and your happy lot, he's speaking to the refugees, is installed in the most proper womanly body of the fortunate Jewess Nasi. And it goes on in that vein. So, Dona Grazia is a magnet for the refugee Marranos, those fleeing, trying to get back to their faith and to their Jewishness. She paves the way. The shipping lines are still working. And where there is a refuge, the refuge is adopted. And Dona Grazia, interestingly enough, whilst her Jewish education was probably fairly poor, I mean, she was brought up in Portugal, in a Marano surrounding where there was Jewish life, but she certainly wouldn't have had an intense education or have been exposed to much piety. But it may be that in this sense, it's almost a bit of outpoping the Pope. When she was exposed to her Jewish identity, she grasped it 150%. And if you like, became almost chauvinistically Jewish, if I can use that phrase. And anything that was Jewish, she invested in, she nurtured, and she fostered. But clouds on the horizon. Shmuley, would you please take us a little further on? Line 50.
There were more storm clouds on the horizon. The fanatical Cardinal Carafa, the future Pope Paul IV, had become all-powerful at the papal court, and Italy too was becoming dangerous for Jews, especially if they were lapsed new Christians. The Inquisition was reorganized, and an assault against Jewish books was in the planning stages. In 1552, the Mendes family left Ferrara for Turkey. They travelled overland from Ferrara to Ancona, and then across the Adriatic Sea to the port of Ragusa, Dubrovnik in Croatia, where a huge amount of money was paid in customs to this Italian mini-state for goods already transported and for those to be dispatched in the coming years. Dona Grazia left Ragusa and entered the Ottoman Empire with an entourage of 4 luxurious coaches, described by observers as triumphal chariots, and 40 armed men. She took the Roman road, the Via Egnatia, named after the Roman governor of Macedonia, who built it across the Balkans to Saloniki. In Salonika,
take the Via Egnatia to this day. Okay, it's 690 kilometers, and it goes from west to east. All right across the Balkans in Salonika.
She encountered many Spanish and Portuguese Jewish communities where they transported Jewish rituals and methods of Torah study, synagogues, rabbis, philosophers, and poets. After a sojourn in that very Jewish city, the family left Salonika and arrived in Constantinople, where they settled in a beautiful villa in the fashionable European suburb of Galata. From her base in Constantinople, Donna Grazia developed an extensive business with Italy and France in pepper, wool, grain, and Turkish exports, especially textiles. She soon had her own fleet of ships and a network of agents all over the Balkans, Italy, and France. She enjoyed the protection of the Sublime Porte, and her ships and cargoes were protected by the powerful Turkish navy.
And at that time, Turkey was still a power, and it certainly had a better navy than any European country. So she rebuilds her financial base, remains the millionaire, okay, and is a fervent supporter of Jewish causes. For example, rescue of captives. Jack, could you please take us from line 34, Donna Grazia?
Donna Grazia continued to rescue Moranos wherever they were and to provide generous help to the indigent. She was active in the rescue of captives, Pidyon Shurim, for example, ransoming Jews from the Knights of Malta for a huge sum of money. La Signora, or Hagiveret, as she was known, supported Jewish life throughout the Ottoman Empire. In Constantinople, she established a yeshiva and synagogue in the Balata district, which became known as the Synagogue of the Signora. The first Rosh Yeshiva was the Maharival, Rabbi Yosef Ibn Lev.
Okay, I'll stop you there, Jack. The Synagogue of the Signora, the yeshiva in Constantinople, was established by Donna Grazia, and the Rosh Yeshiva was Rabbi Yosef Ibn Lev. Rabbi Yosef Ibn Lev, known as the Maharival, was born in 1516 in Greece, or the Balkans actually, and he died in 1580. As usual, the rabbis, the great poskim we're going to talk about, were the sons of Spanish refugees who escaped around or after 1492, okay? And they made their way slowly and painfully to the east and were welcomed in the Ottoman Empire. Yosef Ibn Lev studied in Salonika with Rabbi Yosef Taitachak and Rabbi Yosef Karo. Rabbi Yosef Karo we know. Rabbi Yosef Taitachak I mentioned a few times in the Zohar Shiurim. He was probably the preeminent 16th century Spanish Kabbalist before the Ari, okay? And I could spend the next 4 hours talking about Taitachak, okay? Just to say his name, of course, is a challenge, Rabbi Yosef Taitachak, but he was a tremendous luminary in every way. And Yosef Ibn Lev was a very sharp and talented student. At the age of 34, he was co-opted onto the Bet Din with Taitachak and Karo in Salonika. Before Rabbi Yosef Karo had his epiphany in the Balkans, and he and Shlomo Alkabetz went on Aliyah and they set up in Tzfat. And that's the story we're going to talk about in the next topic, which we're going to do, which is the reintroduction of smicha in Tzfat by the Spanish refugee rabbis headed by Rabbi Yaakov Beirav. That's the next story. Our story encountered Rabbi Yosef Ibn Lev, who was a genius, in fact, a Talmudic genius. He combined the Spanish method of pshat, clear analysis of Gemara, seeking after the ultimate halachic answer, together with the pilpul, with the very sharp distinctions and, if you like, very fine distinctions made by the Tosafot and the science of Talmud study. But he was a very prickly personality, had a very short fuse, as they say, lost his temper very fast, and he was a man of great principle. So he wasn't very manageable, and he had very little diplomatic skill. And what happened was that when he arrived in Salonika, as I said, he was co-opted onto the Bet Din after he studied with the two greats in the city at the time. And he was known as a very brilliant, but a very principled Dayan who would not favor anybody. And as you know, we have a saying, Bala Meyahu Bal Hadeya, which means that
The rich people are important.
The rich people run the show.
The gold,
Uh,
the golden rule is whoever has the gold makes the rule.
There we are, the golden rule. Whoever has the gold makes the rule. And in Antwerpen, if you wanted to be respected, you had to be a grand diamantier. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes,
If you were-
where are the Mayas or the Daya?
Exactly. Okay, so if you were a petit diamantier, it didn't help much. So this is, and Rabbi Yosef Ibn Lev was constantly rubbing up against the rich, and the powerful. And they wanted to cut corners and they wanted to do their thing and have the community go their way. And he resisted to the extent that he made a bitter, bitter enemy who was a parnas of one of the main synagogues in Constantinople, a certain Rabbi Baruch. And when Rabbi Yosef Ibn Lev's son David, left Salonika for a village outside of Salonika on a business errand, he was murdered. And it was apparently committed by the emissaries or the hitmen hired by Rabbi
Baruch.
Who was, as it were, the grandfather, the sandik, the godfather of the rich and the wealthy, who found the Marival to be a thorn in their side. And it actually got to murder. Okay? Rabbi Yosef Ibn Lev suffered a second tragedy because he had another son who actually drowned doing tefillah in a river. You know, I mean, if you can't swim and you insist on doing tefillah, you know, it's unfortunately, it can result in accidents. Don't think he was the only tovel who actually drowned, but this, of course, was a great tragedy for the Marival, and he basically declined, and he died in Salonika, and as I said, in 1580. But he left Salonika, of course, and he went to Constantinople. It was there that he was befriended by the Mendes family. Donna Grazia took a liking to him. As I say, one of the things that I find psychologically interesting is that Donna Grazia became a great supporter of very traditional rabbinical poskim, okay? And she was drawn to yeshivot and to shuls, coming from what must have been a very distant culture, okay? She was a national Jewess, certainly very proud of being Jewish, but she was in awe almost of the traditional Jewish way of life and of those refugees, rabbinical refugees who reestablished Spanish Jewry, as it were, in the East, and became their major financier and supporter. So, of course, when the broken Marival came to Constantinople, she befriended him. She set him up as the first Rosh Yeshiva in Constantinople, opened a very large yeshiva, many students, and the Marival was able to teach and spend the rest of his life insulated from the vagaries of Jewish communal politics of the rather rough sort that he'd encountered in Salonika. So that is the Maharival. And let's read on. Line 1, she also. Alan, would you please read from line 1, the she also founded?
Yes. She also founded the Livyat Chen synagogue in Salonika.
What does the phrase Livyat Chen mean? Anybody?
Yeah.
Livyat Chen. How would you translate that?
Accompanying grace.
Company Grace.
No.
Livyat Livia here means
Oh, the
A
lioness.
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 A lioness.
a lioness.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
But actually, it's a phrase in Tehillim. Liviat hen l'roshecha va'anakim legargarotecha. So Livia means, with a vav, it means a type of golden crown, a diadem, a crown that goes, a chaplet of grace is a beautiful translation in the pasuk in Mishlei, okay? Liviat chen hen roshecha, the mitzvot are a chaplet of grace around your head, va'anakim legargarotecha, and a jewel, a beautiful necklace around your neck. So
Well, she was Donna Gracia, Grace.
grace, there we are. We can make that connection too. Absolutely. Chen, okay? Vatisa Esther chen be'enei kol roeha. So Liviat chen. So it's named after her. It's a feminine form. And it also, of course, combines the idea of ruchaniut, of tefillah, and Talmud Torah. So it's a very beautiful name. And the Liviat Chen synagogue in Salonika. Can you continue, please, Alan?
Right. The first rabbi of which was Rabbi Moshe Almonosnio.
Almosnino.
Almosnino. Of course, a little Sephardi Alan would do better than the Polish Moshe. Let's have, if you want, Musa.
Okay, whose great-grandfather and grandfather had both been martyred by the Inquisition.
So here again, it's the story of the Spanish refugees who eventually made their way. It's a tragic story. Rabbi Moshe Almosnino, he was born in 1516, the son of Spanish refugees, and he came in from Salonika again, where the first large group of refugees settled, and he was a polymath. He knew languages, philosophy, astronomy. He wrote commentaries on the Bible, and one of the commentaries that we use is Rabbi Moshe Almosnino's Perush La Torah. So again, we have this group of really very talented and very accomplished Spanish refugees, their children and their grandchildren, reconstituting Spanish learning with its breadth in the East, in Salonika and in Constantinople, and in other centers in the Ottoman Empire. Okay. She also set up, Alan, please.
Okay. She also set up and financed an advanced Beth Hamidrash in Salonika, directed by one of the Spanish luminaries of the period, Shmuel de Medina, Maharashtam, we called him. Yeah.
Maharashtam.
Yeah. The idea was to offer outstanding young scholars a short but intense course in advanced rabbinics, thereby preparing them for leadership roles in the Ottoman communities.
Donna Grazia insisted that there's only one tutor, one head of this, if you like, early rabbinical seminary. It would take in the brightest young men and their families, would give them, if you like, it was a kollel, give them a year or year and a half. They'd have an intense course, and then they would go out and they would have to become the rabbinical leaders in communities right through the Ottoman Empire. So again, she was a prototype of many of the things we realize are important and need to be done. So here too, she invested a large amount of money. The young men and their families received stipends. The Maharashtam was the only salaried and paid lecturer, if you like, in this rabbinical seminary. He was a very famous Meishiv indeed. And the difference between him and the Marival was, whereas the Marival had a fiery personality, the Maharashtam was deeply loved because he was very mild and he was very humble. He's always very accommodating if he can be, and he didn't rub up the influential members of the community in the wrong way. So rabbinical personalities do have an impact on the success or failure of rabbinical careers. Okay, and many of you know about that because you've dealt with rabbis here and there, and it's an interesting whatever. We don't want to get into Lashon Hara. Okay, so let's move on. Robert Vassell, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right.
1554.
In 1554, her nephew, Joseph Miguez, arrived and re-embraced his Judaism. He was now Joseph Nasi, and he married his cousin, Reina Nasi. Don Joseph continued.
In other words, it wasn't Moses Hamon's son who got to marry Reina or Malka. It was the cousin. And cousin marriages were very, very popular in those. Okay, they didn't know about genetics, and as far as they were concerned, the cousin is ideal. Same background, knows the family, I guess, cooks the same way, but in any way, it will be easy to adopt her into the family and to make the whole transition into married life an easy one.
Isn't there a contradiction? In the beginning, you spoke about Donna Reina, wife of Don Meir Benveniste. Don't you mean that this was the sister of Gracia? Because you cannot have.
No. He did not marry his aunt. He married Reina.
Yes, but the first one is correct. Maybe that was the other sister of Gracia, because Reina was not married before she married Nasi.
Reina married Diogo.
Yes, but on the fifth line here, you said that Donna Gracia was the wife of Don Zemer Benvenisti, and Donna Reina was the Don of Meir.
She was also called the same name. C'est le même nom.
Hazard.
Yeah, the same name, except that the Christian name of Donna Grazia's sister was Brianda. But she was called Reina in Hebrew, which is the Malka, and the same name was used for Donna Grazia and Don Francisco's daughter, namely Malka or Reina. Or Reina, yes. Yeah, sure. It is a natural mistake, but remember that Don Diogo and Brianda had a daughter, and they called her Grazia. So how did you know to differentiate between the niece and the aunt? They call the niece Grazia Chico, okay? The little Grazia. They used the same names, okay? A feature, they weren't Chabad, but they used the same names, and that's why it is a little confusing. But these are the facts, and they have been researched very thoroughly. Okay, not by me, by Cecil Roth, the great historian of Italian Jewry, who wrote a major book on Don Joseph of Naxos. Okay, so that is the book to consult. Of course, it's also Yitzhak Ber on the history of Spanish Jews. So let's have a look. Robert Vassell, were you reading?
Don Joseph continued his role as his aunt's right-hand man and went on to an illustrious career, eventually becoming the Duke of Naxos and the Cyclades.
Yeah, the Cyclades are about 30 islands in Greece, okay? Naxos is one of the islands that was a very fertile island. The other island of fame is Santorini. Now, what happened in Santorini in the year 1400 or so before the Common Era?
Volcano.
Volcano, very good. Volcano and tsunami. And some of the scholars, non-Jewish especially, explain the 10 plagues by explaining that what happened was that there was a huge volcanic eruption in Santorini, and the sky became very dark. And that's how you got the plague of darkness, and there was hail, and the rivers turned red because of the mineral deposits. Santorini is very important in those who want to explain the 10 plagues as natural phenomena. So you can read about that if you want to read about Santorini. There are about 30 islands in the Cyclades, and Don Joseph became very wealthy indeed. Naxos was a very fertile island, and so between him and Donna Grazia, the empire simply grew and grew and grew. And now we get deeper into Donna Grazia and her Jewish side. And this is quite an amazing story indeed. In 1555, who's next, whom I can see? Yonat, would you like to read a little bit from line 12 in 1555?
In 1556, Donna Gracia initiated the first attempt in diaspora.
No. You've jumped. Line 12 in 1555.
In 1555, Donna Gracia managed to fulfill her promise made 20 years before bringing
bringing
remains from Lisbon. From Lisbon churchyard, where he had been buried, and have them interred in the Valley of Yehoshaphat in Jerusalem. This event was marked by the giving of a huge amount of alms to the Jerusalem poor.
Alms, of course, means tzedakah. Now, imagine this. You have a fabulously wealthy Jewish millionairess being able to get a body out of a churchyard of a Catholic Christian, for all intents and purposes, get the body out and ship it to have it buried. I mean, what was in the Aron, in the coffin, in the Valley of Yehoshaphat in Jerusalem. Now it's remarkable. This whole story is remarkable. But the strings that needed to be pulled and the bribes that needed to be paid and everything that was done to do this is beyond imagination, but she did succeed. And by the way, where is the Valley of Yehoshaphat? Valley of Yehoshaphat is
Kidron Valley.
Sorry?
It's Kidron.
Okay, it is between Har HaZeitim and Ir David, Kidron. And what's it called in Arabic? It's Wadi Joz. For those who know it, it's a very ancient burial ground. But what is Wadi Joz? Now, there's a theory. They say Wadi Egoz, right? But there are no nuts there. There are no nut trees. There was a French cartographer who thought he heard the Arabs say Wadi Joz, and it became the official name in a French map drawn up in the 19th century. But actually, what the Arabs were trying to say was Wadi Josaphat, and the French cartographer missed out the fat and only heard was Wadi Joz. So he wrote it as Wadi Joz, but Wadi Joz is in fact Yehoshaphat, named after burial ground for the king Yehoshaphat. And by the way, it is also identified with Emek Shavehu Emek HaMelech. It is the Emek in Shalem where Melchizedek and Abraham had their meeting, and that's the holy ground. So there's a whole story here, but in any case, that was where the remains of Francisco Tzemach, Nasi Francisco Mendez, the Spice King of Europe, were eventually interred 20 years afterwards, okay? Donna Grazia brought the bones, the remains, to Jerusalem, to Yerushalayim, the heart of the Jewish people. Now, okay, thank you, Yonat. Who is next? Who would like to read? Julian, welcome back. Are you willing to read? Julian Liu, okay. Yitz Bauernfreund, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. In 1556.
In 1556, Donna Grazia initiated the first attempt in diaspora Jewish history to stand up to Gentile persecution by fighting back rather than praying and fasting and remaining bowed before the non-Jews.
I mean, this is a Yom HaTzmaut theme. Stand up and fight. Okay, a proud Jew doesn't take a beating, but fights back. That was not the case. For a long time in the Galut, we prayed, we fasted, and we never fought back. It was only with the emergence of the Zionist movement that the idea of standing up and fighting back replaced the idea of crying, beating the breast, and remaining bowed. We remember Chaim Nachman Bialik and the his description, that terrible description, Migay of the pogrom in Kishinev, and how he, it's damning in a way, because the husbands were looking at their wives being violated, and then the question they were asking was, will we be able to resume relations with them, okay, rather than getting up and fighting the violators. And it was from that the modern Zionist movement drew its first, some of its ideology, that the idea is to stand up and fight. But Donna Grazia did this in the 16th century. How? Yitz, would you please read on the basic facts?
The basic facts of what became known as the Ancona boycott are as follows. Ancona was a busy commercial port in the Papal States on the east coast of the Adriatic Sea. It served as a major trading post between Italy and the Ottoman Empire.
So if you imagine the Adriatic Sea between Italy and Greece, so on the west side, you have the Papal States. On the east side, Ragusa, which is the last Italian state, you have an entry point into Constantinople. So Ancona was a busy commercial port actually on the west coast of the Adriatic Sea. And what it served was, and it served as a contact point from trade from the Ottoman Empire into Italy and then into the rest of Europe. Now, this was a very, very important, extremely profitable trade route. So if you had Ancona in your jurisdiction, which is what the Pope did, it was in the Papal States, you stood to make an outstandingly large profit because you charged customs and excise for all the trade that came through from the east to the west. It served as, could you give us another couple of lines, please?
It served as a major trading post between Italy and the Ottoman Empire. Since the popes were interested in making their ports profitable.
And here again is the influence of money. Even the Pope, okay? Or Davka the Pope, you might say. They issued
safe conducts to Jewish residents in Ancona, guaranteeing them the right to practice their faith without interference. A large number of Jews were living in the city, many of whom were Marranos, now living openly as Jews.
So when things were going well, Jews would come, Marrano Jews, okay? There was a Jewish community of Jews who had fled from Spain, 1492. There was also a large number of Marranos who had converted, who lived in Spain or Portugal, and now moved to Ancona, and like Donna Grazia and a family in Ferrara, were able to stop living as Christians, stop pretending they were Christians, and live openly as Jews, and nobody disturbed them. Remember, we're talking about Catholics. Ancona was in the Papal States, okay? Everybody turned a blind eye, as it were, okay? But you have to be lucky. And as long as the popes and the papal commissioners in the Italian Papal States were willing to turn a blind eye, then the Jews could flourish as Jews. But as soon as the situation changed, then terror. It all depended upon the type of pope who was in power, and also where Christianity was going in terms of its fight with Protestantism. A lot of factors. Okay, the Jews had to live, as we say, a fiddler auf dem Dach. Okay, that fiddler on the roof image, always just a fiddler on the roof. You never know, because you can fall this way or that way, but in the meantime, you fiddle. So, and I don't mean the schwindling type, I mean the musical type. Okay, I'm going to try Julian Liu again. Are you there? So I'm going to go back. You are. So Julian, would you like to read?
I am here.
From line 22, a large number. Oh, sorry, line 24. However,
I'm not sure I got. I'm following the text, but I've got a different page number.
I'm on page 2,
Yes.
page 2, and I am line.
And I'm on. I think I might be on the document that was sent last week.
I suppose he has printed on the A4.
You have last week. So you know what?
Oh.
I will relieve you of the obligation to read because we just have the new one. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going back up the list here. Let's see. Okay. So the top of the English is Avi. You're on.
However, when the fanatically anti-Jewish Cardinal Carafa became Pope Paul IV in 1555, all the previous privileges granted to Ancona's Jews were disregarded. A papal commissioner was sent to Ancona to investigate charges of Judaizing, and in the spring and summer of 1556, a series of acts of faith were held in which 25 Jews were strangled and burned, including Jacob Mosso, who was Dona Gracia's agent in Ancona. When the news reached Constantinople, Dona Gracia convened a conference. Where did it go? A conference of Jewish lay leaders and rabbis. A plan was proposed to move the entry port of all the Jewish-controlled trade from the Ottoman Empire to Italy, most of which was in the hands of Dona Gracia, from Ancona to the more northerly port city of Pesaro in the Duchy of Urbino.
So we had another dukedom, okay? The Papal States, and they're surrounded by these little dukedoms. So there's a dukedom north of Ancona. Ancona is in the Papal States, which is in the Duchy of Urbino, and the Duke was well disposed. Read on, please.
The Duke was well disposed to the local Romano community and was tempted to be even more generous in providing a safe haven for many more crypto-Jews by the prospect of Pesaro becoming the dominant port on the eastern trade route.
So here we have the issue come up very clearly. The Duke of Urbino says, wouldn't it be great? Okay, the Jews have come to him and said, you know what? We could transfer the trade from the east. Who is in control of the trade from the east? Dona Grazia. Now, she wants to take revenge on Ancona. So she is going to order all Jewish trade, which is mainly hers, but not exclusively, to go from the east, from the Ottoman Empire, and land not in Ancona, but in Pesaro, in your territory. And this will destroy Ancona economically. And as the voice on my left said, nothing changes. Will strangle Ancona economically, will make Pesaro flourish, and the friends of the Jews will win the day, and we will batter and beat the nasty Pope who is killing and strangling and burning our Jews who only want to get back to their being Jewish. All right, so that was the plan that was proposed. The Duke was well disposed.
We were up to 25, to the plan was accepted.
Okay, right. Yeah, yep. The plan was accepted.
The plan was accepted, and an 8-month cherem was declared against any Jewish merchant using the port of Ancona. Turkish metal and skins no longer arrived in Ancona. Bankruptcies followed, and the Jews of Pesaro congratulated Turkish Jewry for breaking the arms of the wicked who live in the city of blood, in whose skirts is the blood of our martyrs.
So there we are, a worthy cause. What happened then? Shmuley, would you please take up the theme, line 39?
Boycotts, however, need unity, and there were cracks from the very beginning. Salonika had always maintained that Constantinople, Adrianople, and Brusa had to join the cherem, and Brusa was not keen because Pesaro had small wharfs and there had been some accidents. The Anconese Jews felt threatened by papal revenge for the economic ruin of the city, and their rabbi appealed to his colleagues in Turkey for their help in rescinding the cherem.
In particular to the Italian communities in Constantinople, headed by Rabbi Yoshua Sonsino. And where is Sonsino?
northern Italy.
And what is it famous for?
Books.
Printing,
Jewish
Talmud
printing.
printing.
Exactly. So you had two similar problems here. One, the Jews of Brusa, who were feinschmeckers of trade, decided that Pessaro's wharfs were too small. Now the Duke was prepared to expand the wharfs, but he needed to be sure that he'd have enough Jewish trade to justify expanding the wharfs. And then there was also pressure by Ankeni's Jews who were saying, we are now in danger. It's all very well you taking revenge on the church and on the Pope, but we, the Jewish community, consisting of born Jews and who came there earlier, and also the many Marranos who are now living as Jews, but now we're under threat of the Inquisition. We are going to be in trouble if you rock the boat. The Pope is going to take revenge. He'll send the Inquisition and it will make our lives absolutely miserable. Moreover, I'd just like to get the next line in. I can see your finger, Ian. Give me a half a second. Two Jews, Shmuley.
Two Jews from Brusa became notorious blockade runners, and Ancona began to be turned to life.
Okay.
Now
No, just a second. So, you've got a combination of that, and always with a boycott, somebody wants to make a profit and is going to break rank. Unfortunately, people are weak and they are greedy. So three causes for the breakdown or the cracks appearing in this cherem during the 8th month in which it ran. Ian Taylor, what would you like to say?
Well, you more or less answered it, because there are people who are greedy. But what else has to happen? The people are burned and killed, strangled. The Jews said, "Why don't they just get out of there and move on to somewhere else?" But you're saying that you gave the answer by there are greedy Jews who want to make a profit from the situation.
It wasn't so different. It wasn't so easy to move on, especially if you didn't have the money. Okay, so and Ian, if you ask me, why don't Jews leave when there's a threat? I don't need to go back in history for too long.
As you had a comment on the left of on your left, nothing changes.
Nothing changes. Jewish life is very precarious, and you don't know whether to leave or not. And you say, perhaps we can improve it. We'll stay. That's our history that fortunately we have been able to break, but this is a very rare time. Okay, now, Jack, would you like to give us a few more lines, please? Line 4. Yeah. Now the Pesaro Jews became anxious.
Now,
that's it.
The Pesaro Jews became anxious. The Duke had been promised an economic boom. If it did not happen, the Jews would be subject to the Inquisition. The 8th month period was coming to a close, and notwithstanding all her efforts, Donna Gracia failed to win over the support of one of the
most important, line 8, most important.
The most important halachic authorities in Constantinople at that time, and namely Rabbi Yeshua Soncino. Although the Spanish-Portuguese rabbis supported the ban, the combination of rabbinic resistance to it and the lack of unity amongst the various Jewish communities made it unworkable, and the boycott collapsed. Pesaro Jews were duly expelled, and there were no more experiments in which Jewish resistance to Gentile oppression until modern times.
There we are. And then we'll just read the next bit, which is the end of the story. There's a Zionist element here too. And let's see. Robert Vassal, would you please give us line 13? Donna Grazia.
Donna Grazia and her nephew then set their eyes on Eretz Israel and established a Jewish silk manufacturing factory in Tiberias, where she intended to end her days. However, Donna Grazia died in Constantinople in 1569 before realizing her dream of moving to the Holy Land and being buried next to her husband, she was universally mourned. Rabbi Joseph Trani Maharit summed up her life of devotion to her people and faith as follows: Rabot banot asu chayil v'chana alta al kulan.
Okay, so that's our story. So we're gonna analyze two halachic aspects of this amazing story. Okay, one concerns the dispute over the Mendes estate. The other is the Ancona boycott from a halachic perspective. So let's see. Yeah, we should be able to set the scene. And next week, I will begin to analyze the Chuvot. We'll read them. There'll be scope for Hebrew readers. And let's see, sometime after. Human nature doesn't change. Money affects family ties, sometimes in an almost unbelievably adverse way. And many of us know stories of families that people don't speak to each other over money. Okay, not that uncommon. So sometime after, let's read about that. Marcel, would you please give us a little bit? Sometime after the arrival in Constantinople.
Sometime after the family's arrival in Constantinople, Donna Brianda took advantage of the fact that under Ottoman law...
Who was Donna Brianda?
The sister of Grazia.
The sister of Donna Grazia, married to Diogo, the brother of...
Two sisters and two brothers.
Exactly. So Donna Brianda had, in fact, got the family in trouble in Venice. She was always keenly aware that the Portuguese law did not suit her. Under Portuguese law, because Don Francisco had created the capital of the Mendes fortune, Portuguese law said that half went to Donna Grazia. Most of the other half went to the child of Donna Grazia and Don Francisco, who was Donna Reina, and a small part could be given to other relatives. So Donna Brianda was basically cut out of the family fortune by Portuguese law. Now, let's read on.
Took advantage of the fact that under Ottoman law, the Jews in the empire enjoyed judicial autonomy, under which all civil disputes were dealt with by rabbis and Batei Din applying halakha.
Now, this is the system that the Ottomans introduced called anybody know the name of the system that grants religious groups in the Ottoman Empire judicial autonomy, the right to run their own legal systems? Begins with M, ends in a T. The Millet system, okay? And this was the basis for Israeli law following the British Mandate, giving rabbinical courts, Sharia courts, and Christian courts the right to rule, the sole jurisdiction, over their religious communities, mainly in matters of personal status. But also it gave official standing to rabbinical courts, Sharia courts, and Christian courts. And this was an Ottoman invention meant to keep the many different religious groups in the empire happy, because they would be able to exercise their religious law and it would be recognized by state law. Okay, so what did Donna Brianda decide to do?
She sued her sister for half the Mendes fortune by virtue of basic Jewish succession law, under which the estate ought to have been divided between Francisco and Diogo and their heirs.
Okay, so according to Dinei Yerusha, we would give estate to the children, okay? And it would be divided basically between the two brothers for all sorts of reasons I'm not going to go into now. But under halakha, you could very well have treated Francisco and Diogo as equals, and therefore the estate would have been split half-half, and therefore Donna Brianda would have been entitled to half, and Donna Grazia would only have been entitled to half. But let's have a look at what Donna Grazia.
Donna Grazia counterclaimed that under Portuguese law, the only legitimate heirs were herself and Reina, with a small amount available to other relatives.
Why?
Because this was Portuguese law.
Yes, but the two brothers were associates.
The proof, yes, but as I said, the capital actually was founded by Francisco alone. So because he was the founder of the capital, and that's basically 16th century Portuguese law, founder of the capital, then the estate is split between him, his heirs, and only a small amount was allowed to go to other relatives. So, no non-Jewish Portuguese law, no problem with women, okay? Christian positions were different. This legal position
had been agreed to by Francisco in a notarized contract at the time of their marriage, and the same went for Diogo. As far as a small amount available for distribution to other kin was concerned, Donna Grazia argued that it had long been exhausted in her effort to extricate the family from the mess created by Brianda in Venice. And as a result, Brianda was not entitled to a single farthing.
So there we are. Now we've set the scene for the Tshuvot. I'm going to stop a share because our time is up. So what you have here is an interesting question. What law is to govern the Mendes estate in the Ottoman Empire? Are we going to follow halakha, which will be much more generous in terms of the late Diogo and his widow, Donna Brianda, and Renia and Grazia Chico, her daughter? Or are we going to follow the Portuguese law, which was the law at the time that Francisco and Donna Grazia married in Portugal in church, okay? And the notarized agreement signed, which they did in those days, okay, with a Portuguese non-Jewish lawyer, okay, giving the bulk of the estate to Donna Grazia and her daughter Renia. And of course, Donna Grazia was very quick to point out she owes nothing to Brianda because Brianda had made an awful mess in Venice by her greed, and it was Donna Grazia to spend a huge amount of money to get certificates of orthodoxy, to persuade the kings of England and France to step in on her behalf, and eventually to convince the Ottoman Empire under its Sultan Suleiman that the interests of the empire lay in supporting Donna Grazia. So therefore, Brianda got nothing. Now, this is an interesting question because the case was a din Torah and brought before the most famous rabbis of the time in the Ottoman Empire, who happened to be, who were the most famous rabbis at the time in the Ottoman Empire?
All supported by Donna Grazia.
Marival, supported by Donna Grazia. Marashdam, supported by Donna Grazia. Moshe Almosnino, supported by Donna Grazia. But of course, their Piskei Din were absolutely objective and were not colored at all by that support. And they all mentioned that in one way or the other in their Tshuvot. And that story we will tell in the text of the Tshuvot, all being well, next week. And for the time being, we will just wish each other a very good night. Besorot Tovot on the geopolitical front, as always. And may the state of Israel go from strength to strength. It's almost getting to Shmonim, which is 80. So that's might. So hopefully the might and the main will already be 2 years before, and we will be able to withstand all the storms and enjoy the lulls, hopefully, that await us in whatever scenario is going to open up. So on that note, I will say that as we said on Yom Ha'atzmaut, Moadin L'Simcha V'Ligula Shalema.
Amen.
That's it for this evening. See you all being well.